Thanks, John Corla. Minister, this was an issue that was raised last Minister's questions by my colleague Deputy Wallace, and it relates to the effectiveness of our overseas missions. Currently we operate under a number of different banners on quite an ad hoc basis, and I'm wondering, are you going to stand back and review the effectiveness of our overseas missions, and would it not be better that we restricted ourselves to fully fledged UN missions rather than a sort of an ad hoc basis that we currently engage in?
Thank you.
Say, Deputy, that participation in overseas peacekeeping missions is a key element of Ireland's foreign policy and has been an important dimension in meeting Ireland's international obligations as a member of the UN and the EU. Foreign policy is directed at supporting cooperative arrangements for collective security through the development of international organisations such as the United Nations, and supporting effective international action in areas such as disarmament, peacekeeping, development and human rights. This approach continues to define Irish priorities within the UN system, and Ireland remains willing to play a full role in contributing to the security of Europe and the world. The Defence Forces are currently primarily deployed on overseas missions in support of international peace and security under UN mandates. However, with the increased use of more robust Chapter 7 missions, the UN has turned to regional organisations such as the EU and African Union and NATO to manage operations on its behalf and under its authority. This is one of the most significant changes in relation to UN efforts at maintaining international peace and security. In effect, the UN and NATO, together with other similar such organisations, are now major players in UN peacekeeping. Peacekeeping also adds to Ireland's international security by containing conflicts and reducing the threat of conflict spreading. UN peacekeeping missions such as UNIFIL have made a real difference in countries such as Lebanon. The UN operation the UNIFIL operation has supported political transitions and helped the region to close a chapter of conflict and open a path to normal development, even if major peace-building challenges remain.
Thank you.
My time is up. Is that
yeah.
I'll come back.
Come back to you.
Yeah. I think the point, Minister, is that the question isn't saying that we shouldn't participate in overseas missions, but it's standing back and looking at where we do them and how we do it. And you talk about effective peacekeeping, and it's precisely that, to look at that. I mean, currently our policy at the moment has been described as a sort of a scattergun approach by sending Irish soldiers as unarmed observers to a multitude of locations, often in very, very small numbers. And I think in the context of the limited resources available to the Defence Forces and the limited impact that small numbers can have, that we should stand back from that. Personally, I think it's a very worrying trend that we are getting involved with forces under the EU and NATO banner. For example, the mission in Chad is really about furthering French economic interests rather than any serious attempt at peacekeeping. And what the question seeks to do is look at missions such as, for example, the Congo, where 5 million people have died due to conflict since 1996, which has been practically ignored by European states and others, and a properly fledged, if you like, UN mission and Irish troops participating somewhere there actually could have a very effective role rather than the scattergun effort that's there now.
I understand the point you're making, and of course we have to prioritise, because we have a defence forces that has a limited capacity in terms of peacekeeping abroad, and so we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. But I think it's important to make the distinction between peacekeeping missions or other peace support missions that the UN or NATO are coordinating, and the role of the UN in that. The way in which the UN undertakes missions in different parts of the world has changed. What they do is they ask collective organisations like NATO or the UN to lead missions on behalf of the UN. Ireland isn't involved in any peacekeeping missions that doesn't have the blessing or the support or the mandate of the UN. What we do is we work with international partners in order to effectively do a job in partnership or for the UN. And it's the way the structures actually come together and people work together. Partnership for Peace within the European Union is a very good example of that.
Thank you.
So all of the missions we are on do have UN support, and normally Ireland goes at the request of the UN in order to do that. And only this week we've made a decision to send a Defence Force personnel to West Africa, to Sierra Leone, to support the efforts in relation to combating Ebola. I mean, if we were waiting for a UN resolution on that, we would have real difficulties, but we are very much doing a job in response to a call from the UN for assistance and help.
Thank you.
And that's the way these things will work.
We're not asking you to slavishly follow any international organisation. We're asking you as Minister of Defence to stand back and look at the effectiveness of our troops abroad. And the reality is that countries like the Congo have been exploited and abused by Western powers and colonialism for decades, and nobody is interested in them. Meanwhile, French interests are being advanced in Chad, and that gets support. And you see, there are UN missions that we're involved in that, just because they're UN missions, we shouldn't just accept that. And we do have to look at areas where conflicts have been running for decades, like the Middle East, which has gone on since 48, Irish involvement since 58 in the Golan Heights. I mean, there comes a point when the presence of UN or international peacekeepers really becomes a facilitating mechanism for the continuation of conflict and doesn't deliver peace. And I think that's what we have to stand back and look at all of our missions in that way and see where more effectively our troops can be deployed for the best reasons.
Thank you.
Well, I can assure you we don't say yes to every request. Any time that Ireland is requested to participate, because we do have a very, very strong reputation within the UN for a country that has defence forces with a level of experience and expertise and a skill set to do difficult post-conflict and peacekeeping operations. We do that in partnership with a number of other countries that also have a reputation for doing the same. So any decision to send defence force personnel abroad, I can assure you, is not taken lightly. Secondly, we haven't been in the Golan Heights since 1958. The current UNDOF mission in the Golan Heights has only had Irish involvement for a little over a year because we were asked at the UN at the time to fulfil a particular role in relation to that UNDOF mission, which was very important. And we have done that in very difficult circumstances, and I think Irish people should be very proud of that. And I'm glad to say we have avoided any tragedy or injury or loss of life in that mission. So my job is to make recommendations to this House and to government in terms of where we prioritise our resources in different parts of the world. I take your point on the Congo. I agree that is a part of Africa that in many ways has been abandoned to tragic effect. But Ireland can't solve every problem. We need to be able to prioritise where we send our troops, and we evaluate in a very detailed way before we do that.